Estate Agency X, the UK's #1 estate agency podcast discussing the future of estate agency, entrepreneurship and business with hosts Mark Burgess and Rob Brady.
Welcome to this episode of Estate Agency X. On this episode, I'm talking to James Allen. He's got 27 years in estate agency, working in corporate, working in independence, and obviously building his own business up over the last 19, 20 years. We talk about the difference between the first 10 years of his business, where growth was quite slow, and probably the last 10 years of his business, or 8 years of his business, whereby he suddenly started to see a big uptick in the money that is coming into the business. He talks about how not to leave money on the table, how to use technology to scale your business, and how to stop being such a control freak with everything you do. Hi, James. Thanks for coming in. Before we dive into things, can you just give us a bit of a background on yourself, how you got into agency, a bit about your company, that sort of stuff?
Of course, yeah. So I started in estate agency in, I think, 1997. Long time ago, almost from school.
Black and white times.
Oh, God, yeah.
Nearly.
Black and white photos, sticking the photos on the leaflet, sticking in the window, this kind of thing. So it was super old school back then. Working from hot boxes, phoning people. It was actually a good time. It was a good time, but it was quite kind of when you look back, technology and the whole way that estate agency, the world has evolved and changed is dramatic. But prior to that, I went from kind of being in quite a good position in terms of my future, shall we say, to actually kind of, I suppose I failed to a degree in some of the jobs I did when I left school. So I did my GCSEs, had A levels and bits and pieces, 3 university offers. Mum and Dad went on holiday, and I thought it'd be a good idea to go and get a job. So I was kind of not so much into the university thing, but I just wanted to go to work. I was hungry to do something, and I ended up being a salesman, but door to door. I just fell into it, and it was one of these jobs that was advertised in the newspaper of sports marketing or something. I think that's what it was. That's what it's purported to be anyway. So I kind of was hook, line and sinker. Off I go as an 18-year-old kid, driving into Bristol every day, and I took the job, and I was working mental hours, 12 hours a day, getting the train here, driving there, and so on, knocking on doors and trying to sell stuff. And I wasn't that bad at it, but to be honest with you, when you're doing it and it's pissing down with rain all day, it's not the best thing to do. No. Self-employed, cash in hand, so on and so forth.
And was the sports aspect just that you got to walk?
No, that was the hook. Right. That was the hook. That was the thing that dragged me in, and I was kind of like, I was interested in sports, but I must have had a sales thing in me. Yeah. Where I was kind of like.
But what was the sports thing about knocking on doors?
Well, you were selling like gym memberships,
right,
2-for-1 meals, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, fine, that's I'll give it a go, see what happens. 6 months in, I thought, that's it. I was battered and beaten, and I then took a job working in telesales in Bristol, big company. Didn't have the voice for it, wasn't kind of mature enough, the voice wasn't strong enough, and I wasn't able to assert any authority on the phone call, and basically was just getting batted out the door left, right and centre. So I had to kind of leave that job as well, and end up working in a factory doing shifts and things, and I was kind of at my lowest ebb then. I worked there, I guess, for 3 months, 4 months, looking around for other jobs, and a trainee estate agency job came up. Crazy low money, 5,000 quid a year. That was the salary. Yeah. The hours were 9 till 8, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 till 6, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday 9 till 6, Sunday 11 till 4. And my long week was a long week. It was a 70-hour week. It was mental. And I kind of, I was just fresh into it. I was completely didn't have a clue what I was doing, but it was actually pretty cool because I got paid to talk to people. And that was what I've always enjoyed about estate agency, was just going to see people and chatting to them. And I progressed really quickly. So within 6 months, I was valuing properties, negotiating sales, and it kind of rolled from there. So within a very, very short period of time, and I'm talking like 3 years, I was not only kind of progressing from negotiator to senior neg to branch manager, but I was then managing a couple of branches in an area, and I was then even a franchisee at, must have been early 20s, so a crazy young age. I then went to work for a large, what I would now call a corporate agency, but was an independent at the time, but a really big independent, and then ended up managing an estate agency between 2000 and 2005 in a place called Magna for a very strong independent agency. And that's where I didn't really get my training, but what I did is get a very good grounding for how to run a successful independent estate agency. And during the 5 years I was there, I didn't ever have any intention of going back to the corporate world, with people telling me how to look and how to act and how to go about things. It was just, when you're working in a estate agency, you're either kind of independent or you're corporate, and I just wasn't anything that reflected a corporate agency. So off the back of that, the business I was then managing did really well. We were getting kind of office of the month, office of the quarter, office of the year, back to back, this kind of thing. And I just wanted to go on. But bearing in mind, I was only kind of still, I wasn't even 25 at that time. So I was quite hungry to want to progress. But the company I was working for had just employed an area director for that division. And the job that I wanted kind of wasn't really available. So my boss said, look, James, you're doing really well, but the position isn't available. So I then thought, where do I go next? What do I do? A mate of mine was working for Foxtons in London, so I thought I'd go and see Peter Rollins, who was MD at the time, have a chat with him. Went to see Peter, told him what I wanted him to pay me, which he agreed to, which was great. So the kind of the salary matched the change of location and this kind of thing. And my partner came up to London. We spent the weekend looking around. She was interviewed at St Guy's and St Thomas's for a position, and the wage was pretty much the same as it was with at the hospital she was working in Bath. So in the end, we decided not to do it. But during that period of time, and it must have been, I guess, a week or 10 days, that we were deciding, do we go to work in London and live in London, or do we not? She must have said to me, why don't you set up your own business? And I probably said no, or joked, or laughed, or did whatever. But then suddenly it happened. And within, 2 or 3 months, I decided I was going to set up my own estate agency from the dining room of what was then my mother-in-law's house. Sold the car, had a nice car I was smoking around in, that got sold. Rented out my house, took a 20,000 quid overdraft, and kind of the rest is history. But it was a scary time, but a great time. And it was one of those, just to put this into perspective, when we were setting up the advertising and this kind of thing, I was using Rightmove from the get-go. So the business I set up as a limited entity from the get-go. So we were VAT registered right from the start. Yep. I was using Rightmove, and Rightmove then was £341 a month, whenever it was, 2005, 2006. So it was pretty cheap back then, but it wasn't really a big hit. It was something that we added on to the website. Yeah. But I was sending across the advertising to the newspaper, and it used to take me about 30 minutes to send the advertising across, because I had one of these flashy half iPad, half phone things, and I plugged it into the laptop, and the laptop used to send the photos and the text into the phone, and it used to just send it through and my phone bill was colossal because I was working from the dining room. I didn't have internet working properly. It was literally going through the phone. It was so cat-handed, it's unbelievable. When you think back, it used to take me hours to send the advertising in.
Amazing how fast it's moved. Do you remember how much the newspaper was costing?
Oh God, it must have been 3 or 4 times the cost of Rightmove back then. It was ridiculous.
Per would that be per week or per month?
I was taking like 4 boxes. I was probably an eighth of a page or something. Yeah. It was kind of the smallest ad I could possibly get away with. I couldn't even afford for sale boards. Yeah. And the worst thing was I was able to afford one for sale board. Put the thing up and it got bloody nicked as well. I was absolutely gutted.
Valuable.
Yeah. So that's what the business was like. It was very much hand to mouth. Yeah. And I think I got to being something like £18,561 overdrawn, something like that. And I was going into the co-op next door, buying coffee, thinking, is this the last bit of coffee I'm going to buy, kind of thing, and is it going to bounce? So it got quite close to the knuckle, and it took me about 11 months to come from being in the red back to the black and actually starting to make some money. So it turned around quite quickly. Yeah. But it was a very emotional time, but it was quite a scary time as well, because I did have that period in the 11 months that I thought I'd exhausted all of my avenues. Because I was chasing up valuations, I was phoning people, working the database, and I was kind of like, well, I've got no one to ring, I've got nobody I can email, nobody's coming in through the door. What the hell do I do next, kind of thing? And that did happen. It did happen. And I got to the point that I thought I'd kind of exhausted all of my avenues, and suddenly things started to kind of turn back around in my favour. And the business then, for I guess a year, 2 years did really well until the recession came. But we went from a completely kind of a fresh start of nothing and started to roll the business out. And the support I've had from people that knew me or had recommended me was just invaluable. That was the only way that the business could have kind of progressed in the manner that it did. But back then it was, yes, very hand to mouth, and it was one of those that you think, where's the next valuation coming from? Yeah. When are we going to get our sales commission in? And this kind of thing.
When you set it up, what did you learn from your previous? You said various different roles you had. What did you grab from that and thought, the day I open up mine, what do I want to stand for and what do I want to?
Well, there's a bit of a story behind the employment, so I kind of missed a bit really in terms of how I got the job. Firstly, the telesales, I learnt a bit. But the door-to-door sales, I learnt a lot.
Yeah.
And what I forgot to tell you guys is that when I was working in the factory and I was offered the job of the trainee estate agent, I was interviewed by the manager of the office, and the manager of the office gave me the job. So the minute he did that, I went straight back to the factory, said, guys, I'm off kind of thing. Here's my notice. So I was working a notice at the time. I was then booked in for a second interview with the owner of the company. And I did the interview, and I was just assuming I had the job, so I wasn't exactly trying to sell myself. I was just chatting to the guy. He then phoned me up a day or so later and said, I'm sorry, I don't think you're the person for us. I was like, okay, thanks. Put the phone down. Thought, shit, I've got no job. I've quit the existing job, and the new job I thought I had, which was a third of the wages I was getting paid at the factory, no longer existed. And I was in a bit of a bind, and I put the phone down, and it was a funny one whereby I must have spent half an hour or so thinking about what to do, and I thought, no, this is not on. They've offered me the job, and they've now told me they haven't. I phoned the guy straight back up, the MD, and a massive go at him down the phone and said, what are you doing? I've quit my job, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, well, fair play. You've actually had the balls to do it. You've got the job kind of thing. Even though it was a shit wage and crazy hours and stuff, it was one of those that it kind of taught me a lesson.
Yeah.
But the lessons I learned from the door-to-door selling and the lessons I learned from working for that company and being literally at my lowest ebb with no job and so on is that I never wanted to be back there. I never wanted to be back there. And one of the kind of the primary things that pushes me on now as a person is knowing where I was before I left, before I would have gone to university, for example, from having a job or thinking it was the next best thing since sliced bread to having no job and being at a very low ebb. And the thing that always drives me on is I'm not going to go back there. Don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
I'm competitive by nature anyway,
yeah.
But it's a thing that drives me on because I always revert back to the situation I was in.
Yeah.
I've never been given anything in my life. I've always had to work for it. And this is the kind of the thing that drives me on a daily basis.
Yeah. Your agency, like, compared with all the other agents that are in the sort of local area and stuff, is a very forward-thinking brand. Do you think that you were influenced at all by that trip to London where you went and met Peter Rollins, or not really?
Well, one of the stories that I don't tell many people this, but I always go to London in January for my fiance's birthday, and while she's out shopping and chilling out and stuff, I'm just refocusing. So I'm recalibrating myself, and you get through Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And my reset is second week of January. But what I used to do, as sad as this sounds, is I would spend my time walking around London, looking at the agents, seeing what they're doing, looking at what Foxtons are doing, looking at what Marsh and Parsons are doing, and looking at Ed. Is it Ed
Mead?
Ed Mead's business, and looking at how those businesses are progressing and what they're doing in the background. Because when you transition between, let's say, London and you come to a rural area like mine, it's chalk and cheese in terms of window display, the way that they run agencies, the way they work, and this kind of thing. And back then, and I'm talking 20 years ago, back then the difference was huge. Nowadays it's a slightly different thing, but that's how it started. That's how my education started in terms of a estate agency, in wanting to do things differently. But it's only been in recent years that I've actually been able to really kind of push the button financially and move it forward and invest in not only myself but the business in the right way.
Yeah.
I've always been a little bit kind of hand to mouth with websites, advertising, how much you advertise and all this kind of thing. And it's been a nightmare because you want to kind of push.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got the money there, you can't really. So you just try and make small tweaks and changes as best you can.
And what do you think, looking back now, You said there was a line in the sand whereby you were suddenly able to start investing more in the company. If you look back, what do you think the milestones were to that change?
Well, the milestones to that change were really from the opening of the business. We had a couple of years of it being decent. Then we had the recession, 2008, I think it was.
Yeah.
That took us 4 years to recover from that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that kind of came out of the recession was we had lots of people wanting to sell properties. They couldn't sell because the market had crashed and so on. So we then had lots of accidental landlords. And we decided that we'd set up a lettings business, which I knew nothing about back then. And we worked very much hand to mouth. Under the premise we would do tenant find, so we wouldn't really manage stuff unless we absolutely had to. But we'd be finding tenants for landlords and this kind of thing. So we set up a lettings division almost by default, really. And the lettings business was kind of, again, pretty hand to mouth for 6 years, maybe 8 years. We might get 10 landlords, we might lose 6, this kind of thing. And we slowly got up to around about 100 landlords and fully managed, I guess. So we grew, but we didn't actually grow. It didn't actually grow that quickly as a company. And I would say that the transitional time, and I'm looking at the numbers here, so I'd focus on the numbers. We were then, say, 2012, 2015. The business didn't grow properly until 18, 19, 20, I would have said. And that's when the business, in terms of the numbers, started to really, really kind of move on.
Why? What happened? Like I say, if you look back now, like that's 10 years. When you started 2005?
2005, yeah.
Yeah, so that's 10 years of, all right, there's been a recession and but sort of muddling through. And then 2015, something changed and the business started to actually sort of bring in enough income for you to do all the things that you'd wanted to do.
Yeah.
What was the learning?
It was actually learning to release, because when you're self-employed, you want to do everything. Well, you don't want to do everything, but it's trusting people to do other things. So not from the get-go. I was kind of working on my own solely for a period of time. Then I employed one person. Then I employed a part-timer and a weekend person and this kind of thing. And slowly I was starting to offload bits and pieces. But what I didn't really understand is that although you might have kind of 2 full-time members or 3 or 4, you need to sometimes let go of the business and let the business grow organically. And that's what I failed to do from the get-go. I was holding on to too much and I was working crazy hours, just kind of picking up stuff and doing things that actually other people could do. They probably wanted to do, but I was picking it up and doing it myself. And then you end up overloading yourself with work, which then curtails what I can do as a person.
Yeah.
So from, say, 2015 to 2019, that's kind of what happened. We started to then, as a business, employ more people and then just embrace the growth of the business naturally. But we had the ability to do that. So rather than being overrun with valuations and phone calls and emails and all this kind of thing, actually we could then start to apportion the work to other people, and we then started to grow slightly.
Yeah, because you could spend more time thinking about strategy or just how it was all going to work.
That's right. Yeah, completely right. And I got to a period of time where, I'm guessing, say 2018, I was thinking to myself, well, where do we go next with the business? It also kind of co-aligns with the birth of my 2 kids, who are now 11 and 13, because shit got real.
Yeah.
And when it does, God, when I set the business up initially, we would we'd work and think 3 o'clock, let's go to the pub, let's go and have a beer, this kind of thing. It was very chilled out. It was great, but it was a business that was more of a lifestyle business than it was a full-on proper estate agency. So when the children came along, which kind of co-aligns with the timescale, that was also an important period of time for me, because at the time we had multiple mortgages, we had big bills, we had depreciating property values and so on. So things were getting quite kind of serious at that time. And we had to then focus on, as a family, just making things work in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's no kids around, it's like, what you got to lose?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's very much, it was go and buy a bike, buy a car, whatever you're going to do. But you didn't really have any kind of great pressure.
Yeah.
But then when you have to kind of run a business and pay the mortgage and pay the wages of the staff and this kind of thing, it certainly just focuses the mind a lot more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go on, Rob.
I was about to say, and from that 2019-20, 4 years later, have you seen? You said it grew that 15-19 period. Has the curve continue in the same way, or has it gone shot?
I suppose up to 2018, 2019, it was a very slow curve. It was poor.
Yeah.
And when I look back at it, I think, God, I could have made a difference perhaps earlier.
Yeah.
But the business grew exponentially from say 2019, 2020, and then from then onwards, it's just gone mental.
Mm.
Yeah. And I've not suddenly got a lot better at what I'm doing, but I've actually run the business in a different way.
Yeah, all because you could put people in those tasks that at one point you thought was critical that they get to deal with James, but you sort of released that for people to do what now are probably you would consider maybe mostly admin tasks, I guess, and you could then focus on the strategy side of the business. But what things did you end up doing once you could do that?
Back
did you
then,
end up implementing?
Yeah, interestingly, in the last probably year or two, I've started to offload more and more and more, almost to the point that I'm kind of stepping further and further back away from the business, but the business is making more and more money.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing that, because I'm able then to focus on other things that make more money by doing just slightly different changes.
But there would be people out there that maybe are back where you were, and you'll be familiar with this type of thinking, that are thinking, that sounds great, but if I just stepped away from my business now and let everybody else run it, it'd just fall to bits.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I was only chatting to somebody last week, same thing, and she said, "Well, I haven't got time to do that, and I haven't got time to do this, and so on and so forth." But what I would say to those people is, yes, you do, and unless you do that, you're going to struggle. You're going to be doing the same as I was doing for 10 or 15 years, where you're just chasing your tail all the time, because unless you start to offload work to other people and allow the business to grow and to flourish, you're always going to be very hand to mouth. And when in age terms you start to ebb, when you get to the time that you're not as influential as you might have been, or you don't have the energy that you might have had, then your business is going to struggle, because if you don't adapt and don't change, then the business will either falter or it's going to be very much hand to mouth.
And how are you using technology to help you with some of that stuff?
Massively now. Massively. The business has kind of just evolved and changed so dramatically that when I look back to, let's say, 2017, 2018, it's a completely different change. So we're using different CRMs to look after our rental portfolio, different CRMs for our estate agency side of things. We're using an online payment system for receipting and paying rents. And that's been a biggie for us, really, because I was spending, a whole day reconciling and paying rents.
I'd like to say, reconciling.
It's interesting, though, because, you were spending a whole day reconciling rents, but, paying out for a specific CRM for your sales side of the business and a specific CRM for the letting side of the business and a payment system, people would go, "Oh, no, I can't afford to do that. I'll reconcile the rents all day." So, it's interesting that it sort of ties in with what we were just talking about before, doesn't it? Like, how did you stop yourself being the type of person whereby you've been in dark times and you're driven by the fear of, like, I don't want to go back there, so I'm not wasting any money on any of that stuff. I've got to make sure this business stays afloat.
Yeah,
I'll just reconcile the rents, and then flipping over to let's get technology to do it, and we'll pay out an extra, I don't know, X amount of £1,000 a month for this technology, but it'll be all good in the long run.
Yeah.
And obviously now you've come out the other side of that, so you could, I don't know, maybe give someone advice that's sitting in that boat, because it sounds like implementing all that technology coincides with your spike in, the
funny thing is when the recession came, we were in a situation where we had our primary residential property that we lived in, and we had 4 other rentals.
This is 2008 time.
Yeah, 2008 time. So it co-aligns with when my eldest was born. And I remember this very clearly, because we had a situation where we had depreciating property values.
Mm-hmm.
The rents weren't going anywhere, but the mortgage rates were going up. And our residential mortgage went up by over £1,000 a month, because we'd only lived in it for 2 years or something. So it went up by £1,000 a month, and we were then on an interest-only mortgage. And I had back then, this was a fair bit of money, over £1 million worth of mortgages on these properties. And I sat in the bath with my eldest, just sat like this, and I cried, because I thought, what have I brought you into? And it learnt me a very important lesson. But this is the weird thing, because the lesson I learned is that, right, okay, I'm not going to put myself in that situation again. We sold the properties, all of them bar two. We got ourselves back into a situation where the equity from those properties, one of them was negative, so we lost money on it completely. But the equity I used to basically pay the wages and run my business. Damien, who still works for me, my sales manager, had to take a pay cut, which that was the last thing I wanted to do. So fair play to him, he kind of accepted that, and we were in a situation where our turnover was something crazy, like 4 times less than it might have been during the recession. So it was a horrendous time. But it was one of those I came out thinking, right, I'm never going to have an overdraft again. I'm never going to borrow money, yada, yada, yada. So from that mindset to now is a completely different thing. But we still don't borrow money. We still don't have an overdraft. The business is just run in a slightly different way. So when I look at our overheads are perhaps double, but then our gross income is perhaps treble or 4 times more, whatever it might be. So
do you think that the technology is that all that stuff that you just mentioned, like, do you think that without it, it's impossible to have a fast growth? Because being technology, it can do manual tasks much more efficiently and faster than other people. Qualifying applicants, paying rents, all of these sorts of things, posting content, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
it can do all of these tasks en masse.
Yes, yeah,
in a scalable way, as opposed to perhaps, everybody wants to deal with James, and there's only so much James can do in a week.
Or hiring 3 negs to do that same role.
Well, this is the thing. When I look at some of my competition, they might have 7 staff, then they have 8, then they have 9, then they have 10, and the photos on the website just get bigger and bigger and bigger. You think that's great, fine, fair play. But when suddenly they let 1 go, and 2 go, and 3 go, and 4 go, you know the reason why, because they're not doing the numbers, and they don't have the back end facilities to deal with high volume. So they're constantly hiring and firing all the time, which is no good for staff morale, but it's also no good for the business, because the numbers are going up, going down, and going up and going down. So if you're not building a scalable business, then how do you possibly expect in 10, 15 years time to have a business that you can almost allow to run itself? Because you don't have the structure beneath you.
No,
yourself.
that's right. It's true. It's so true. I was just talking to Rob about. I met the guy who gave me my first job in a estate agency at the weekend. I met him at a party, and he was just saying what he does now, and he's had a few agencies, he's thinking about opening another one, but he's not sure because there's just no money in it, and blah 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 blah. And he said his best sort of story that he's got that sort of sums up his whatever it is now, 30, 40 years in agency, is that his best ever month when he had this single branch agency was they brought in 101 grand, something like that, and his outgoings were 102. He said, and that pretty much sums it up, and that's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it? Like, it looks like it's getting better and better and better, but unless most agents come from the background of they were an estate agent. They don't need to be taught how to do estate agency. They're brilliant at it, but they don't have the business knowledge to build a scalable business. So it's fine if it's just them making a bit of a living. It'll always be a hard slog. But like you say, once you reach the age whereby your kids are getting to, I don't know, they're 10 or 11, and you're starting to think, hold on a minute, I haven't actually got anything for when they turn like 16, 18, 20. My daughter might want to get married, or you're thinking about retirement or any of that sort of stuff. Suddenly it hits home, doesn't it, that like, this business isn't scalable. I haven't built a business here. I've just built a job for myself.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think especially when it comes to like lettings, I remember having those issues where we had a big student portfolio that we knew we released in sort of December, November time, and that lasted for like 6 months. But then it went obviously quieter, but it'd be more busier in the property management side. It'd be quieter, but then you had the residential side. So you had these bits in that working 12-month calendar where you surge of admin requirement, but then the other side is you go, those negs are just going to be twiddling their thumbs. So having those facilities to be able to scale technology that does some of that, when you go manically busy, the systems scale with you, and then when you go quieter, it doesn't cost that
You haven't got like,
2,
classic
3, yeah,
twiddling the
yeah.
thumbs.
So yeah, I can understand that part to it.
You've obviously running a letting side of a business and a sales business. So how do you see those two sides of things? Because a lot of people see lettings as I don't know, the sort of the lifeblood of the business, and then sales as a bonus. And a lot of people see sales as the main part of the business, and lettings as a bit of an add-on. How does it sit in your mind?
Yeah, and I was very much the latter. So I'm first and foremost an estate agent. I'm a salesperson. That's my primary kind of skill, I guess. And lettings was a necessity way back then. That was a necessity. And we've always been heavily loaded on sales. So the lettings business might have been at best 1/3 at best of our income. Now it's more than 2/3 of our income. So the business is completely transformed in terms of the way we operate. But the two co-align so well. And that's the thing, because sales will always be kind of boom and bust situation. And if you own an estate agency only without doing residential lettings, the value of your business is kind of like the value of your pipeline. That's it. And I'm not gonna bemoan that, because if you want to do sales but you've got no interest in lettings, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And if you want to do lettings and you don't want to do sales, that's absolutely fine too. I think if you can do the two and balance it off correctly, then that's the most beneficial.
Yeah.
But you've got to have an understanding, and you need to have a hunger or a will to understand the lettings business, because if you don't, then you can catch a cold.
They're two completely different businesses, really, aren't they? I mean, I know, like, you could group it all together and just go, I've got an estate agency, but like when I talk to a lot of people, because life cycle is, you can use it for parts of lettings, and I know that you do, but like, you can use it for if you were just doing sales, you could just use life cycle, right? But if you're doing lettings and property management, then you're going to need another system in order to do the property management and the rent payments and all of that sort of stuff. And when I talk to people about that sometimes, that they should have this specialist software if they want to grow their sales department specifically.
Yeah.
And they should have specialist software if they want to, run a property management department. And no different to me, I should have specialist software for my support team and specialist software for my HR team. But a lot of people seem to struggle with that whole concept because they're used to like an all-in-one Excel database whereby you can just stick it all in there.
Yeah. And I think this is what a lot of people miss. And I get emails and phone calls from business owners all the time now asking about, how do I scale my business? How do I grow this? How do I do that? And this is mental. This is absolutely mental. They suddenly think that if they work another 5 hours, 10 hours a week, they're suddenly going to sell another 50 houses, whatever. They don't understand, whether it's a letting agency or an estate agency, they just don't understand that marketing, as far as a business is concerned, you don't just do it hand to mouth every now and again when you've got 10 minutes. You have to be consistently marketing to people. You have to be consistently nurturing people, and you have to be consistently selling them stuff, whether it's financial services or your next kind of management offering that you've got, or a fee offering you're doing with buyers and sellers and stuff. If you're not actually constantly selling and you're not constantly communicating with people, it's madness to me. Like when I chat to people about it, they're like, oh, so okay, so well, what do you do? Oh, we spend 500 quid on leaflets or whatever. How much? How often do you do that? Oh, about 6 times a year. I'm like, so what else do you do? Well, not really. Don't do too much. So how do you expect to grow? I was hoping you could tell me that. That's what they kind of say. And it blows my mind, because it's one of those things that if you haven't got a consistent kind of marketing strategy in any business, if you haven't got a marketing strategy, how the hell do you expect to kind of exist in 5 or 10 years' time? Or how do you expect to grow and scale as a business? It's madness.
And is that like tying that back together again then? You're referring to life cycle, I guess, when you're saying that, but whereby it's now constantly nurturing people, because, I was saying about you've got one software here, you've got a software there, and people are like, oh, it's all disjointed. You're saying, yeah, but these people aren't doing any marketing. So you're saying that you need a system that's going to be doing that side of things.
Yes, you do. And I think my greatest example of this is when myself and Damien would sit down, and this is on the sales side, so I'm talking estate agency now. We would sit down in January, and I'd say to him, right, well, what have you got coming on this year? He's like, well, I've got 7 or 8 houses. And I'd say, well, I've got these coming on, and we've got we might have a site of 4 coming on in such and such, and this kind of thing. And that was our marketing strategy. Literally, that was it.
Yeah.
And then we might chuck 500 quid at some guy to go and put some leaflets around every couple of months. That was it. And we were then reliant on people walking in, or the phone ringing, or whatever.
Referral.
Yeah, or somebody wants to buy a 2-bed and they've got a 1-bed flat to sell and all that kind of stuff. So you're chain building. But that was our business model. And I can bet my bottom dollar that there still are people out there now that are doing exactly the same. Well, I spoke to somebody last week, same thing. That's the way that that's their marketing strategy.
But how's yours working now then? Break it down. Like if somebody's listening on a podcast and they're going, yeah, well, how else would you do it?
Well, put it this way: I don't even think about valuations now. I don't have to give the mind space to generating valuations.
Why?
I don't give because
how does it work?
Well, because the business just kind of evolves and it does its own thing. But I suppose to give you an example of the way that that our company will now kind of operate, and this is only life cycle specific, because life cycle is the CRM that we use for residential lettings, residential sales, commercial, the whole 9 yards. Co-aligned with the valuation, the online valuation tool we have, and the Google setup, it drives the leads in. So you're not just driving leads in for now, and I've booked 2 valuations today off the back of life cycle and Valpal and so on,
right.
Driving the leads in, just sat on the train.
So it's like a lead back then, perhaps. I'm just trying to break it down. Obviously, we've spoken about this many times, but I'm just trying to break it down for a listener. A lead back then would have had to have been somebody that wanted to book a valuation today, and if they didn't, then you might as well throw them away. Whereas you're sort of saying it doesn't matter that you might have 10,000 people in the database that haven't yet booked a valuation. They will, and that's what's fun. It's like you've got a pipeline before your pipeline, if you like.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. And I'm creating audiences off the back of audiences off the back of audiences. So I've got 25, I guess, different kind of marketing strategies at the moment that I'm using for generating leads into the system. But once I've set them up, I don't need to do anything else with it. It just kind of looks after itself.
And what changed from doing the £500 leaflets and January coming and then going to that leap of actual marketing? Like, what was the moment we thought actually?
Yeah, because you must have.
It must be set up
like when we first spoke about life cycle, there must have been part of you that it wasn't like this. There must have been part of you that thought that sounds good, but we don't work like that at the moment. So, like you say,
I was looking for a solution for a good couple of years.
Right,
a good couple of
years.
Is
it just born out of because I remember previously before I was a coach at Iceberg, I was agency, and for a couple of years we'd changed systems and we're doing the leaflets and we're doing the newspapers and we're working out whether the value of Rightmove and all sorts of stuff. And I remember before transitioning into becoming an Iceberg client originally, I was just frustrated of trying to make a change that was a leap change rather than a change to adjust that where everyone else is making that same adjustment and still being that 10 similar agents doing the similar stuff.
Yeah.
And just moving with the trends.
And I think my search started when On the Market became a website, which was when? Any ideas?
Oh, I remember them going around. I think they were offering like £5 a lead to register onto their database.
Yeah,
I would have 16, 15.
Yeah, I would have
16?
thought it was somewhere around there. Yeah. Somewhere between, let's say, between 13 and 15.
Yeah.
So when that launched, I was all in, like all in. I took the gold share membership, whatever it might have been, $5,000 or something. I can't remember what it was, but I was all in because I was fed up with having my backside tanned by Rightmove all the time. Fees go up. Fees go up. No service, no communication, nothing from them.
This was the solution
at all. And I'm like, God, I've had a guts full of these people. They need to go. And ever since, I always swore I'd never invest any extra money in Rightmove other than the most basic package possible. But we were also with On the Market. We were also with Zoopla. And On the Market to me was kind of, I really, really wanted On the Market to work.
Yeah.
I really wanted them to overtake Rightmove. I probably expected them to do a Rightmove on us after they kind of got if they have got their share situation, because if you're the business owner running On the Market, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I was just chasing it because I could see what was happening. I've got friends who are in the car business. They were shelling out money left, right and centre to Auto Trader, doing the same kind of thing. And we all know what's going to happen. We can all see it, but we can't do anything about it. So I was desperate that On the Market would work. But I guess that was when my search started. But then we then transitioned into social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, this kind of thing, people advertising on there. And I started chucking money at Facebook, like it was, to be honest, like it was going out of fashion, almost in desperation to get something going, to find some kind of a marketing strategy that was actually going to work. And you get to the point where you're thinking, hang on, I've got Rightmove, I've got On the Market, I've got Zoopla, I've got Facebook, Nothing was really working. And I was then starting to look at different CRMs and this kind of thing, because we were with Dupix, which used to look after lettings and sales and commercial. So it did all of the stuff at the back end that I wanted it to do, but it was just static. So you couldn't do anything. And we also trialed one of these online kind of marketing companies as well that used to send out newsletters and so on. But it was just literally a newsletter, and I think it used to annoy more people than it actually used to kind of encourage. I think I had 2 or 3 good responses, but a lot of peed off people because we were mass mailing them, and they weren't really overly happy with that. And I guess that was because they couldn't kind of they couldn't edit the content. It was just a one-on-all situation. So that didn't work either. But I had been looking for a long old period of time to find something that was kind of going to actually move us on as a business. So I was being proactive, put it that way. That was what I was doing in the background.
And going from that then to something that you feel did work, what was the difference? Like you said, you had a system that sent out newsletters. There must be a lot of people out there that are using systems like that maybe are thinking, yeah, but we do all that. We send out a newsletter. Like, you know, they've still got Dupix maybe, and they send a newsletter. They've heard people talk about nurturing, and they're like, yeah, we kind of do all of that. So I don't know, what changed from having a load of systems whereby you thought this doesn't really work to having what someone could possibly think are the same systems now? You still run social media ads, I guess, and you're still, you know, doing Facebook ads, and you're still nurturing people, and you're still sending a newsletter. What's different about it now?
Yeah. Well, the difference is, essentially, it is, without bigging you guys up too much, it is the life cycle system.
Go for it. We love it. No, I'm only joking. But like, just I know we talk about life cycle, and often when I talk to agents on here, they shortcut into stuff because we know what we're talking about. Audiences, we know what that means.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but just from a listener's point of view, just try and break that down then, because like you've been in both camps. I'm biased on the whole thing, but you've been in both camps. So how does that work differently? Like, why is it different to what happened before?
Okay, so this has happened twice now in terms of the boost of life cycle, shall we say. First time we started to use it, within a couple of months we started to see a change. Now we've had our last acquisition of 3. The big acquisition has seen the same thing happen as happened when we first started using life cycle, which is amazing. So these are where these leads we were just discussing have come from, because they're people that have come into the database that are suddenly receiving relevant information that they've never received before. So it gives me the ability as an estate agent to sell shit, which is crazy. So you're selling people what they want anyway, but actually it's almost one of those things where they don't know they want it until they've got it, kind of thing.
And in the old system, you were spamming people with a newsletter, so they were getting content. Like, how is that any different?
Because I don't think it was entirely relevant when they were receiving it. But this is a very good example. I went to see, this is a fair few years ago now. Must be 4 years ago, I'm guessing. I went to see a lady to value her property, and she was in our database. So I didn't have a clue who she was. I had no idea. So phone call to go and do a rental valuation. I rocked up at this house, and outside is a sold board of one of my biggest competitors. I'm like, oh, okay, I've got a lot of chance of getting this one, kind of thing. So I knocked on the door, met the lady, went through the presentation, property value for rental, our fees, yada, 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 that kind of stuff. And she said, oh, here you are, James, here's the keys. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? I was fully expecting the lady just to kind of say, that's great, thanks, we'll come back to you, and probably lose the business to my competitor who'd sold the property to her. So I then went back to the office and had a look at the lady's details. And I think for 3 months at least, she'd been absorbing content from us that was relative or relevant to lettings. So she'd been reading content
You'd
And I mean a
you'd
lot
been
of
selling to her while you were sleeping.
yeah, God, yeah. And this is the thing: she was already sold on the company
Yeah.
before she'd met me.
Yeah.
I think it was as much thinking, yeah, I can deal with James, but already she was sold on the company before I'd gone to see her.
Yeah.
So the situation of her giving me the keys without actually kind of anything more than a 30-minute meeting,
Yeah.
the decision to use the company had already been made
Yeah.
before.
And
I'd
that
actually
kind
met
of
the
goes
lady.
back to what you were saying about scaling up as well, doesn't it? Because, you know, I don't know how big your database is now, but let's just say, for argument's sake, 25,000 people sitting in a database. If those 25,000 people were sitting in your old CRM that you mentioned, there's nothing happening there. Like, they're just sitting in the CRM. So when you introduced that newsletter thing and sent it all to them, they all just thought, what the fuck's this? And they just unsubscribed straight away. Like, you'd just bought their data from somewhere.
Yeah.
But now you've got people that are filling out, say, online valuations, they're downloading ebooks, they're registering for property alerts, they're putting themselves into the database. And from that moment, you're continuing to talk to them, and they're accepting of that because they realise that they registered, or some people unsubscribe, I'm sure. And on it goes. Those 25,000 people, like you say, are being nurtured with content that's relevant to them based on how they came into the system. And before you know it, stuff's coming out the other end like a sausage factory.
It was even interesting. You know, you mentioned about like Hotbox early on, and you said those days. I was only speaking to a client the other day, and he said, and he's quite a young lad. He's come from another agency. He's been at our clients for 18 months, and he said the agency had before. They still had Hotboxes.
Yeah.
And the process was 30 in a Hotbox, 31, you get rid of one, and that was so like you talking about, you know, registering as a buy-to-let investor, bought. Oh, you found now. Okay, I'm going to rip at your card, put you in the bin
because it's not scalable.
You know,
Unless
yeah,
you have 100 staff.
and then that, but you're at the other end of the spectrum where it's like, okay, you bought elsewhere, but I'm still going to continually market to you because, you know, you're going to be a client of some sort because you're buying as an investor. But I recognise that.
Yeah.
Not just you're there to buy a house, do the transaction, and if it's either I did business with you or no business with you, you got some value or no value, and after that, I don't really care.
Yeah. Well, this is like a three-stage learning process. So if you're an estate agent and you're running an estate agency business, going back to this situation of the January conversation with me and my sales manager, where's the next valuation coming from, this kind of thing, and you're operating in an area where there's, I don't know, 10,000 rooftops. That's your area. That's what you think your catchment area is. And you're like, well, okay, so I've got 8, you've got 7. There might be a new home site, so we might have 20 houses coming on, whatever it might be. But that's the mindset. The mindset is there's nothing there. And you chat to your negs and they're like, well, there's nothing going on, there's nothing to sell, and yada, and all this kind of stuff. Because you just think that unless your area gets suddenly bigger and they build a shitload more houses, you're not going to do a load more business. But what people forget is actually, if you focus on dealing with the people that are within your database, any new people is a bonus. Whereas previously people are thinking, well, we've got this 15 or 20 coming on, and they're expecting the phone to ring, and they're expecting this brand new golden client to come in and give you 5 brand new houses to sell. That might happen, but the chances of that are pretty slim. Where if you focus on what you've got within your database, that's actually going to be your next client.
Yeah.
So the conversation I have with my staff is like a threefold. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you've got your database and you focus on growing the database. So we started off at 8,000, I think it was. By default, you're going to lose a fair few people who don't want to receive,
of course,
any information. But we're now at almost 28,000.
Wow. So
we're having a big push on data and gathering, building our database of clients. Because the third thing is when you focus on, I'll always educate the staff and say that, and Rob, you'll relate to this because you've been in the lettings business. Estate agents think that tenants are a bag of shit. They just think that tenants are non-relevant to them. And it goes to the same thing as you said, Mark, when a sale has been progressed, you kind of forget about those people. But a tenant will become a buyer at some stage. Or they may or they may not, but they may or may not become a buyer at some stage.
Yeah, the potential buyer. Yeah.
And a buyer will become most likely a homeowner, and a homeowner will most likely become a landlord. So all the 4 are co-aligned. And I'm spending my time on educating the staff that that's exactly what they need to do. You don't discount any tenant, you don't discount any buyer or vendor and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the amount of people now, we've been using Lifecycle for a period of time, that are registered as, say, a vendor, that are actually landlords, or registered as buyers that are landlords or vendors, is massive.
And I see it a lot with when we do like maybe a campaign. A client does a campaign out to their whole database about, like, you know, if you're looking to sell in the next 3 months or by summer or by winter or whatever it might be. When you start to look through the people who've opened it up, it's not. A lot of they say should just send it to just the sellers in the database. So I was like, no, open it up to the market because of those reasons. It's like, that's really interesting. That landlord who was in my database from 3 years ago has just read that piece. So they might be selling their own home. That tenant who was in my database 4 years ago actually went on to buy something, and they might be looking to sell because they might be looking to upsize. So categorising those people into boxes is an incorrect way of doing it if you're thinking just about the transaction.
Yeah, I think like what happens as well is that because this sort of technology hasn't been standard in a estate agency for the last 30 years, people always have known that, haven't they? People have always known that tenants may become buyers, and buyers may become sellers, and sellers may become landlords, and all that sort of stuff. And that's great. And occasionally you have a conversation with somebody and that turns out to be the case, and you'll sort of rejoice at the fact that method works, but it's not manageable beyond the 30 people in your hotbox.
Well, especially when you've got 28,000 people.
Of course, yeah.
If you were to sit down and say, right, we're going to try and speak to every person by the phone every year and see how they're getting on.
They'd all get just as annoyed as they did with the newsletter, wouldn't they?
It's not physically. They go back to you saying about peaks and troughs. The amount of people you've got to scale to try and do that process.
Yeah,
It should be a call centre.
Yeah.
And then where do you go with it afterwards? When someone says, I'm not yet ready. It might be in a few years down the line. I'll keep calling you until you do so.
How do you think it goes then, the future? Like, you know, I mean, obviously nobody knows, but do you think that agents will become more reliant on Rightmove or more reliant on their own databases? Like, how are you seeing that future panning out?
I think if you're reliant on Rightmove, you're working in the same way as you are with a static database, because Rightmove is essentially a static database. They don't give you the leads or the information. They don't really want to.
No,
even.
You don't own anything, do you, basically?
No. So you might get lucky, don't get me wrong. You might get lucky, but the chances of actually creating a scalable business off the back of Rightmove is like zero.
Yeah.
So my focus, if we're looking to build the business and grow the business, is actually on building the database, because I can already very clearly see that by growing the database is actually exactly what you need to do. It's like if we're based here and we're going to set up an office in Fulham, let's just say. So I'm going to spend £100,000 on setting up an office in Fulham and expect that business to work. It ain't going to happen, because unless you've got a database that you're able to grow within that business, you've got nothing that's kind of repeatable.
No.
And you need to have a system in place that's repeatable,
Yeah.
that is kind of giving the client what they want. This is the weird thing. Like one of the valuations that came in today was, again, a lady that had been in the system for a couple of years, I would have thought. But it came straight through. Can I value the house? I'm free Tuesday, Thursday, Friday this week. When can you come and see me? Just completely off the bat. Yeah. That was it. But again, when I look at her record, I took her email address, put it into the system. She's already in there. Yeah. So she's already been receiving information from us, but she was registered as a buyer 2 or 3 years ago. So actually the lady has been receiving content from us for a period of time, and she's got to make that decision as to whether she feels she's a client of my company or not by that time.
Yeah, she's almost become it's almost like a referral in a way, isn't it? Like, you know, like someone saying you should speak to these people. Yeah. She's just reached that point by herself.
Yeah, and off the back of that, when I look at the transition again with the most recent acquisition, it's the same thing. So these guys are like, they're all over it, because they're like, what, you do financial services and you look after commercial and this kind of thing. So I'm having conversations with people that are, although they are landlords of a letting agency that are part of the company I've just bought, they're actually involved in commercial, or they might want to sell their property or whatever it might be. So the selling opportunities off the back of that are actually really big. And that's the beauty of it, because actually you're offering people what they want, but previously, if you're not communicating that fact to them, they don't know about it, do they?
Yeah. So is it fair to say then, when I asked you about the milestones of like what sent the company into this growth stage, was that you released stuff, the technology is communicating with people to allow you to scale and perform tasks like your payment systems and stuff like that, but also all of that has resulted in you no longer leaving loads of money on the table. You know, whereby, like you say, before we just had a landlord or we just had a tenant, but now we're finding out actually there's a load more money that
Yeah,
left on the table.
Yeah,
there.
we are still leaving money on the table, but the reason is because we haven't got time to do all of the stuff I could do. That's the weird thing. Because if you'd have asked me that question when I was using Dupix, I'd be like, what are you on about? None of that stuff makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'd just say, well, I'll chuck 2 more hours at it or whatever. But when you run out of hours, or you've got to go home to your family and stuff, that's where the problems start to hit. So that's, I think, co-aligning with when we wanted to start to change the CRM that we were using and the systems and so on. Yeah. But now I've just got in front of me opportunity. Yeah. I've got opportunity with landlords or home buyers or home sellers or whatever it might be. There are countless different things that I could do on top of what we're doing within the business. It's just then having the time to do so. So there's a lot of money being left on the table, but it's certainly not money that we need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and less than was being left on the table before.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for listening to this Estate Agency X podcast. Can you make sure that you're actually subscribed to this podcast channel if you liked the content? It helps us massively to get better guests, and it just helps us generally. So you might think you're subscribed, but just have a double check whatever your podcast platform of preference is, that you're actually subscribed, and then that way we can continue to grow the channel and get better and better guests for you.